Welcome to the Irish NFL Show's recap of the penultimate weekend of the football season in association with our partners QuinnBet. We have the bye week to breathe, obviously, and get ready for Super Bowl 58 or LVIII if you prefer it in your Roman numerals. And despite the best efforts of both the Ravens and the Lions, we'll get a repeat of Super Bowl 54 in 2020 between the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers. Congrats to both teams, to their coaches, to the players, and of course to the fans, many of whom are tuning in this evening or will be picking this up on podcasts wherever you get yours. And please do remember to like and subscribe so other people can find the Irish NFL Show. It really does help us when you hit those thumbs up, hit those ratings, and subscribe in your podcast app. Well, Colin, Brian, and myself will be heading to the desert, and we'll be on the ground in Las Vegas, bringing you exclusive content from the opening night right up to the game itself in Allegiant Stadium on February the 11th. And we'll have reaction following the presentation of the Lombardi Trophy to either Clark Hunt or Jed York, because God forbid they'd give it to, say the captain of the winning team or the players who've actually spilled blood on the field. We love that quirk of American sports. Give it to the owner. They're the one who puts up the money. We look at how the AFC and NFC conference championships were won and lost, which players showed up and which players made a show of themselves, and there was a couple in that category. And we look at the key coaching decisions and all the major talking points from the games. Before we get into that, though, a couple of interesting NFL news items today, Brian. Ken Dorsey, first of all, sacked by the Bills mid-season, one of the OCs who was a scapegoat, one might argue, for performance issues elsewhere in the coaching camp, but hired as offensive coordinator by the Browns. And I think that's broadly being viewed as a pretty decent hire by Dorsey, who, according to the pro-Dorsey camp at least, and according to the stats and the number of points that the offense put up while he was there, didn't fare too badly in Buffalo. And a lot of people feel that he was unfairly tarred with performance issues elsewhere.
Yeah, I think you've summed it up quite well there. We spoke about it during the season. I think it was after the Broncos game on Monday night, in which Colin had rightly called out the key moments within that game weren't necessarily down to the offensive coordinator, but obviously he was the fall guy. And if you were to look at the games over the course of the 6-7 weeks he was there, his numbers were much more compelling than what we saw from Brady for the remainder of the season. Obviously, he's been confirmed as the new offensive coordinator in Buffalo. I don't think that should be lost in the conversation. I thought it was interesting that the announcement of when it came out last night, like Rappaport announced it pretty much in the third quarter of the Ravens-Chiefs game, which I was thinking to myself, is that a timing thing to, remove the backlash potentially from certain Browns fans who wouldn't have wanted him? Because there was an extensive list of people interviewed, and I think the Browns fans from some I spoke to today with a bit of back and forth texting were kind of had their eyes on some other ones, but so maybe there was something in and around that, but it makes sense. I think he's done enough over the course of the last couple of years since Brian Dable moved off to the Giants as head coach, to be warranted another opportunity to be offensive coordinator. It's a strange one in a way, because the Browns removed so many with a productive enough season for many a wide receiver in Cleveland. They still felt the need to remove everybody from the offensive side of the ball. So it's a very fresh start for him going in there to work for Stefanski.
Colin, fresh start also in your beloved AFC West, home of your Denver Broncos, where Jim Harbaugh, as we were talking about last week, taken over in LA at the Chargers. But he's now since in situ. He's been in the building. He's met the players and says he was starstruck following his first meeting with quarterback Justin Herbert. Is this a meeting that's going to set the AFC West on fire, do you think?
Well, I did see somebody sent out a tweet saying that he's been meeting the players and he messaged the players, and obviously if he didn't get a message, that might be a concern. And somebody quote tweeted saying Austin Eckler has turned off and on his phone 7 times and is waving it above his head frantically to see if he's missing out on a signal. Look, I think with Harbaugh and the comment that he has made there about Herbert, it's about giving Herbert some love. I think last year, obviously not a great one for Herbert. And I think it's, rebuilding his confidence. This is what Harbaugh does. And the starstruck thing, it's a great way to play it, because we know who's going to be the personality in that building. Justin Herbert doesn't want to be the guy, but Harbaugh knows enough. He knows how to play it. And I think what will be fascinating is, again, to see the relationship with the GM, who the GM will end up being, and the relationship with the owners and how that progresses. I think, Harbaugh is much more likely to push them than maybe some of the coaches they've had more recently. And how that roster, they're going to have to make changes. I think again we saw even in the championship games how important the wide receivers are.
And you called it out, Colin, like with the sort of wide receivers that for whatever reason the Chargers went for. They seemed like they were from yesteryear. And you look at that Green Bay Packers roster, you look at what the Texans have done, you look at what the Ravens have done in how they've added to their receiver room, and it's helped propel them ultimately to the championship game. There are plenty of good receivers coming out of college. You can pick guys up in the second and third round who can really do a job for you. There are Puka Nakuas waiting out there if you want to plunge in the fifth round. A lot of good wide receivers in the draft this year. The conversation been dominated by who's going to go in terms of quarterbacks, but there's loads of good wideouts there, potential good wideouts for a team willing and brave enough to do the due diligence.
Yeah, and I just think you're going to see the Chargers get much, much younger. They were too old and they were too slow ultimately in a league that is so dependent now on quickness. And I think Harbaugh coming in there is going to make wholesale changes. I think this might well be Graham Souness famously said, when he was asked, did you try changing too much at Liverpool too quickly, Graham? Is that why it didn't work out? And he said, no, I didn't change enough fast enough. I think Harbaugh will take the approach of making major wholesale changes to that roster. That would be my expectation.
Yeah, you'll end up with Trigger's broom. He's had the same broom for 19 years. He's only changed the head 3 times and the handle 12 times. Yeah. Right, to the championship games now. Let's start with the early game. Sunday evening in the AFC. The Chiefs entered the stadium in M&T Bank in Baltimore as 3-point underdogs to the Ravens. Before the game even started, though, Brian, the mind games began. And it wouldn't normally focus on, little bits of back and forth as we saw between Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, and Justin Tucker, the kicker. But I do think it's worth spending a little bit of time psychoanalyzing it from our amateur position on the couch, because it really did seem like the Chiefs got under the Ravens' skins early, and that set the tone in terms of how agitated the Ravens got, the ill discipline that ultimately was really costly for them in the game.
Yeah, which is why we had a brief conversation yesterday as to what end of the ground Justin Tucker decided to warm up in, because obviously it's split half and half, both sides. Anybody who's been to an NFL game, like any sport, you get your half, the other team gets their half. So it was interesting dynamic. What I did see today was Justin Tucker was out early, and you tend to see that with kickers. If they're usually out warming up a lot more earlier than other players on the team, and he had parked himself down there. So bit of back and forward. Obviously, Justin Tucker didn't seem to get too enamored by it, or didn't get really too overly involved. There was a number of different instances, but yeah, it was very much evident. I spoke about on the show. We all spoke about on the show this week around the Ravens and the pressure going into this game. Probably, despite the Chiefs being reigning champions, was probably more on them, because they were never going to get a better opportunity to go to a Super Bowl. Bearing in mind the teams in the AFC, the Bills were gone. The Bengals have struggled throughout the course of the season because of one thing or another with injuries. And the Chiefs, let's be fair, this Chiefs team is not, whilst they're there and they're there on merit and they're in the Super Bowl, they haven't really been the team in which we've, captured the imagination of many an NFL fan over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. It's been a very different dynamic to this team. So it was there for them. It was, I know we're going to get into the details of the game itself, but yeah, you could argue the Chiefs struck the early blow in terms of, that little piece of needle, but I don't think that's the complexity of the game where it ended up ultimately.
But
yeah,
I mention it though ultimately, Colin, because we saw from very early on there's an incident, a little bit of a flashpoint, where Travis Kelce's getting all sorts of stick on X at the time. People saying, "Oh, Travis Kelce's a prick and he's such a wind-up merchant," but it worked. Jadeveon Clowney sticks his helmet in his face and gets an unnecessary roughness penalty, unsportsmanlike conduct, I think it was. Sorry, not unnecessary roughness. And right at the start, the Chiefs are capitalizing on that little bit of needle. It's working in their favor.
Yeah, and that's what you need. Mayo footballers, English rugby team, Shannon Sharp. Like, people want to have a go at Kelce. Shannon Sharp, larger than life character. Obviously, I'm a fan. Won a Super Bowl with the Ravens as well. Shannon Sharp got the Chiefs to lose their minds in the playoffs in a divisional round game by calling out Derek Thomas's girlfriend's phone number. And Derek Thomas went offsides repeatedly. The Chiefs, his teammates got riled up, and ultimately the Broncos emerged victorious from that, even though the Chiefs were at home. The Chiefs had the better record going into that matchup. So, look, this is at the top level. Sledging, call it whatever you want. They engage in it, and the Ravens were. They lost their heads completely, like right in front of the referee, like to put your face into him. The stuff that they did yesterday.
And this happened repeatedly, though, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to get into it. It just seemed from the get-go the moment was too big for the Ravens, and they'd lost the initiative early on, and they never seemed to get quite back on top. The Chiefs seemed to know exactly what they were doing. It's even encapsulated in that Travis Kelce moment. He knew how far he could push it to get the Ravens to react, but not to get penalised himself. And it reminds you that nice guys don't win Super Bowls. Nice guys don't win All Irelands all the time. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes it's the team that's just ruthless enough and cunning enough and are big enough bastards for the occasion.
Yeah, I mean, like once the referee throws the flag, he is laughing. Like, he is absolutely doing it. And I thought the Ravens may have kind of, and it's funny, he played for both of these teams, but ultimately they both got rid of him. There was a touch of the Marcus Peters about the Ravens, a guy who just can't let it go. And you need to learn to channel that. And sometimes it's absolutely ridiculous and artificial. But Mitchell Schwartz had been on Twitter on all day Saturday, and I was getting very worried because Roquan had made some comments and talking about, Mahomes is like everyone else. He has to put his pants on. And Schwartz was like, look, you just don't do this, because people like Mahomes, people like Brady, they're super competitive and they will look for anything as an advantage. So when you just tell them you're like everyone else, which is all Roquan was saying, it's like, well, no, I'm not. And I'm going to show you I'm not. And ultimately, Mitchell Schwartz gets proven correct in that. It's like Brady going, we're still here, the plucky Patriots. It was so obvious to everyone from the outside that was ridiculous. But as a team, they bought into it, they believed it, and it gave them that siege mentality that they needed.
And hold that point, because I want to come back to the Brady thing. And you mentioned it even when we were previewing this with Brian. You wanted to make a point on the discipline and the sledging and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I think what was even more agitating as well to the Ravens was the fact of, I think it may have been the next play, there was consecutive flags on two plays, because the next one was the roughing the passer on Mahomes, which was let's be fair, it was a clear, he went in with the fist onto the helmet. But the one later on in the game, which probably summed up the entirety of the game, they come up with a strategic move in terms of how they can, keep the
deliberate offside.
The deliberate offside, and the whammy of that is he can't even manage that correctly because their heads were so gone. He goes in with a really zealous, I suppose, tackle on the offensive line player for the Chiefs, and he gives up 15 yards, which essentially then puts the Chiefs in another finer position to kind of close the game. But at that stage, their heads were gone completely. It was a completely ill-disciplined performance. I'd say even offensively as well. I think we'll probably come to the nature of how they performed offensively, but both offensively and defensively yesterday. And does that not come from the coaching side of things, that in a week where you know what the Chiefs are going to do, you know the narrative, you know the way they're going to be treating this game, you know how they're going to react to certain things on the road. It's a volatile atmosphere, as most supporters know in Baltimore. Everything was essentially going to be against the Chiefs. They're going to find ways. Sure, the coach and staff would have had the team ready to deal with these certain circumstances. It just seemed off. They were chasing the game. They were panic mode. When they were 14-7 down, they seemed to be in panic mode. It was just one of those very
this last week. Like, apart from the X's and O's, and there was very, very little, and is very, very little to choose between these teams, and I think you can probably make the argument on paper at least that the Ravens are a better team. But one thing that was very obvious to me, and we talked about it when we were previewing the game, was that the Chiefs were all business after winning their divisional round. It was, Andy Reid saying, no dancing, we're not done yet. Whereas the Ravens were celebrating. You're celebrating winning a quarterfinal at the end of the day for a team that should have Super Bowl aspirations, that says it has Super Bowl aspirations. But there's a difference between saying you think you can win and knowing you can win. And the Chiefs going in seemed to me like 2 opening drives encapsulated a lot of what went on. Baltimore 3 and out. They've had the chance to prepare for this all week. They've scripted the plays. The Chiefs surgically move down the field. Completion after completion seems to go to Travis Kelce, and they register 7 points before Baltimore know where they are. And they never really managed to wrest the initiative back, did they, Colin, Baltimore? And to your point, somebody made the point earlier today, I forget who, you look at the box score and you look at the stat line, Mahomes didn't seem to do anything amazing, but how many times have we seen Tom Brady do that in divisional round games and AFC championship games? You play the moment, you play the game that's in front of you. You know, when you need an epic completion to Marquez Valdez-Scantling, the ultimate insult for the Ravens at the end of the game, when you need those big catches by Kelce, the right pass was always there. The right decision was always there. He didn't need the fireworks. He just needed to do what he needed to do.
Yeah, and to me, I suppose the Ravens, they got too clever, right? They got away from the run, and they decided that they had to be the new era Ravens, and they wanted to win by throwing the ball. And as I've said before, what made Brady better than anyone else was if you had told Tom Brady going into a game, Tom, you aren't going to throw a single pass. Forget Mac Jones's three pass attempts for the Patriots against the Bills. You aren't going to throw a single pass, but you're going to win the game and you're going to win the Super Bowl. He'd have bitten your hand off. He didn't care how it was done. And it's funny, we talked to Otis Anderson, who Brian, that'll probably raise a smile, but he talked about the Giants' plan against the Bills, right? In that obviously they wanted to keep the Bills off the field, fewer possessions. But when they had the ball, they actually said they dared Jim Kelly to they sold out on the they wanted him to keep throwing it. They knew, and they were like, if they had tried running on us, they'd run on us all night. But we knew they wouldn't do it. We knew the K gun. They'd keep going pass after pass after pass. We sold everything out, and it was like that. Like you kept watching it, and the Gus Bus, three attempts, and when he actually got the ball, he was very good. It was crazy making to watch it. And yes, Lamar had a bad game. He had a very, very poor game. But Todd Monken's game plan, the inability to make adjustments, was absolutely infuriating. And yeah, they looked ill-prepared, underprepared, and they never, ever responded. And that is a damning indictment, I think, on Monken above all else. Lamar absolutely deserves some of the blame. The whole team deserves some of the blame. But it was incredible to watch it, and you kept thinking, surely they'll make an adjustment. Here they finally got the ball back. Maybe no, there was no adjustments, and it just left you baffled and befuddled.
Brian, this was the thing that, we were back and forth in the WhatsApp group over to see Leisha and others mentioning it in the comments, that nobody seems to be able to get their heads around why Baltimore went away from the run in the one spot where you thought they really need to do it. They racked up 229 yards on the ground against the Texans in the same weekend that we were watching the Chiefs really struggle for large parts of their game against the Bills to contain the run game and to contain James Cook. The path to victory here seemed to be to put the ball up the jumper at first instance, which is what we know the Ravens are built around or have been built around until they got rid of Greg Roman. Instead, I don't know, was there some sort of bizarre form of validation in play here where Monken and Lamar needed to prove that they could win and put the ball in Lamar's hands to throw it to win the game rather than just doing what was necessary to get over the line by hook or by crook?
I suppose there's a combination of a lot of things here. You're talking about the run game, with the exception of the playoffs, because let's be fair to the Chiefs defense, they played really well over the course of the last 3 games. They were 28 against the run over the course of the regular season. That's not a good stat. You'd expect the team to run and continue to run and try. Ultimately, as I said, they've got they got the Hill, they've got Edwards. The Chiefs ran the ball 32 times. The Ravens ran the ball 16 times over the course of the game. Like that's scary. Like the fact that you continuously, over the course of the season, they played from by and large, they've been playing with the lead over the course of the season. I can't recall too many instances where they've had to kind of play from behind over the course of all the games and we still lost. Like the Steelers game, we spoke about it on Thursday. Most of the games they lost, it was when they were in the lead and someone came back at them. They never really had to play from behind. It felt to me like they were in panic mode. I was just looking at this. You're talking about Patrick Mahomes not doing much. Chiefs had 8 possessions after the 17 points, they didn't score again. They only had 4 first downs in the entirety of the second half, 2 of which came on the final drive. One of them was resulting in a flag, so essentially only one. And yet the Ravens still couldn't find a way to win the game because everything was gone out of control. And after the game, which I thought, like Colin said about concerns, and you're right, I think this goes to the management, the coaching staff, and the offensive coordinator, because Lamar said, we didn't expect the level of blitzing in which the Chiefs came at us with. And they never adjusted to that. And to me, you adjust by having run pass options, feed the run, use Lamar in the run game. None of that transpired over the course of the 4 quarters. They just never got away from it. And to say that they weren't expecting that, this is Spagnuolo. This is what he's built his reputation on.
Thinking about when we watched Baltimore against the Titans in London, and Lamar looked to be so much more patient with the ball in his hands. And, ironically, ultimately, that's what killed him here. He was holding on to the ball too long. He seemed to be second-guessing himself. There were running games opening up, and he didn't seem willing to take them. Maybe part of that was because he hit the big shot to Zay Flowers to score the touchdown in the first half and thought, we can do this. We can do this again. Chiefs were taking away all the intermediate routes where they've thrived during the season, making them do something different. But to your point, I cannot for the life of me understand why they weren't expecting the unexpected. They seemed genuinely to be baffled that Spags would dial up the things that he dialed up when this is what he does.
It was like as if Spags looked at the model in which the Texans had in the first half of last week's game. Obviously, in the second half, they couldn't get near Lamar. But in the first half, they were very disciplined and they came at the right time. I think in the last 3 drives, he was sacked a number of times by the Texans. They were 3-0 before halftime. He was like, as if, okay, we'll look at that model and we'll just dial it up a little bit even more to what we can do with the players around us. And they just never adjusted. And you're talking about the touchdown to Flowers. Let's be fair, it was a fantastic play by Lamar because he was dead to rights 3 times on that particular rate. And there was other plays in the game where he threw incomplete passes where it looked like they had him in the pocket and they just couldn't get him down. Like the offensive line was completely at sea as well for large parts of the game. It was just from top to bottom. It was just, I don't know whether the pressure got to them, but they just continue to throw, even like the one at the end, but not necessarily the Flowers one, because again, we spoke about it last week with McCall Harbin and you're reaching out and you're trying to make a play. I get all that. The one at the end with the interception, that's a 4th down type of play where you're trying to make a play. Like it's 2nd down and you're going into triple coverage. It's just bizarre. Bearing in mind the season.
I saw Jay Cutler do that for enough years in Chicago, Brian. I know what that one looks like. Just didn't expect Lamar
even on 2nd down,
full on Zach Wilson in the biggest game of the year. Colin, I think we should make an honourable exception here, and we've been very critical of the Ravens. There's a reason why Mike McDonald is getting head coaching interviews. Their defense was lights out yesterday, bar some of the stupid penalties, which you don't necessarily put on him. The scheme was right. I mean, they shut the Chiefs down completely in the second half. They gave their offense every chance to win that game, and they couldn't do it. But it was not down to the performance of that Ravens defense with the likes of Kyle Hamilton. Patrick Queen, I thought, had a fantastic game. Roquan, apart from the stupid penalty we talked about, had a fantastic game. Matabike, there was so many great performers on that Ravens defense, and they were right for the game.
Yeah, no, they were the one unit, like 0 points allowed, 5 first downs in the second half, and 3.3 yards per play. They were great outside from the stupid penalties, but ultimately, what can he do about that? I think somebody's going to get a sensational coach from Mike McDonald. He's super smart. He adjusts. The contrast between the offense and the defense was so stark. But look, to me, ultimately, what this kind of came down to was if the game belonged to any one individual, it was Spags. He should have been the one. And look, don't get me wrong, Mahomes is sensational, absolutely unbelievable. And we have gone from a situation where you need a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes to win the AFC to you need Patrick Mahomes to win the AFC.
This is why I feel sorry for Lamar, because you're like, yeah, welcome to Peyton Manning's hell.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. And it might be even worse as the first quarterback to reach 4 Super Bowls under the age of 30. Like, this guy's breaking records. And on top of that, he has Spags, who is in his bag of tricks is loving life. And Andy made sure to give him a shout out. But they're a really young defense. It was everything you wanted on the road. It was the perfect game plan for the Chiefs on defense.
Really good defense, Brian, with L'Jarius Sneed, who's, we talked about it before, arguably the best cornerback in the NFL, and maybe put the stamp on that title in that game. That punch out was, well, it's one thing for Zay Flowers to stretch the ball out. It's the other thing for Sneed, A, to be there, and B, to make the play that needed to be made that won the game.
Yeah, I mean, that would have made it 17-14 with something in the region of 7.5 minutes to go. It's an absolute game changer. We can talk about the last drive and obviously taking the field goal and then needed set, but ultimately that was the one. I think that was the killer. They had the Rory made a very valid point there in terms of how many times did we see them, the deep threat over the course of the game, with the exception of the Flowers touchdown. That was the one, and that was just a bizarre 3 or 4 minutes in the sense of just a fantastic play, lack of experience, first round player. He's obviously overjoyed by making a big play, which he thinks ultimately is going to lead to a touchdown and put the team back in the game. He gets up, he does the celebration. Obviously, then that leads to a flag. He then has the fantastic catch. It looks like he's going in for the touchdown. It's a fantastic play. We said it on the group last night. It'll probably go down as probably one of the best 5 plays of the season. And if the Chiefs go on to win the Super Bowl, probably ultimately will end up being the play of the season, unless we see something even more.
Also, I thought the symmetry that the Chiefs had almost exactly the same situation last week, where Jordan Poyer makes the play on McCall Hardman. Obviously, Sneed was watching that tape.
Yeah, and even initially, it looked like I was convinced he broke the plane, and we're just going to see a situation like we do a lot of time where defenses are trying to play to the referee, and ultimately when it gets looked at again, but then you see the replay and it's very evident the ball is out. But again, there was 3 players homing in on him. The tackling levels of the Chiefs defense as well as the Ravens was quite high for this time of the season. We're going to leave everything on the line there, but ultimately, great, one of the greatest plays of the season, and the one essentially that put the game away. I know there was other components to come, but that was the one for me. I think we all knew. Sigh of relief here for Chiefs fans. They're going back to the Super Bowl.
Colin, we thought we'd probably spend a lot more time talking about the offenses after this game. We spent most of our conversation talking up the defenses, but one player I wanted to single out, and people can get annoyed by the behavior on field, the gamesmanship. People can get annoyed by the strange kind of patois that he uses for his public pronouncements. I don't know if he speaks like that in private, but and people can get annoyed about the Taylor Swift romance. But what nobody should get annoyed about is the way Travis Kelce plays the tight end position, because for all we've talked about that Mike McDonald defense and the standout performance on that Ravens side of the ball, and it looked like on a lot of those plays, Travis Kelce was perfectly covered. There's nothing you can do when a guy's going to make plays like that. Like, he was targeted 11 times, he caught 11 passes, he went for 115 yards, and he got the touchdown that they needed.
Yeah, like, playoff Travis has been sensational. Like, you've given the stats yesterday. So in the last 2 games, 17 targets, 16 catches, 191 yards, three touchdowns. I suppose you wonder, has he learned?
I honestly never thought I would hear the phrase "breaks Jerry Rice's playoff record" uttered in my lifetime.
Yeah, like when you see how far ahead Rice is generally in the statistical stuff, it is insane. But he just, I wonder, has he learned? Like, he's older, especially on the tight end side of things. Like, the Chiefs, in the same way, because they are the dynasty now, and they know how to time things. So, you can try. Travis basically throughout the course of the season, is taking it easy. The playoffs emerge, and he looks like a different player. And I think the big piece, though, is that relationship with Mahomes, because his ability to find space and Mahomes' ability to find him, I don't think that would exist with if he was anywhere else. They just seem to have something telepathic. And I think the fact that he went over, he's the guy who has thrown Justin Tucker's stuff out of the way. He is the guy who's going to look after Mahomes, get everyone G'd up.
It's easier to throw the kickers stand out of the way than if, say, the defensive ends were warming up down there. I couldn't help but think.
Yeah. I don't think
picked his spot well there.
I don't think we'll see him doing that with Trent Williams in the Super Bowl in a few weeks.
Right. before we move on from the Chiefs Ravens game, Brian, we do have some significant injury news from that game. It doesn't look like the Chiefs are going to have Joe Thuney back for the Super Bowl, and they're down a defensive lineman as well, which isn't going to help.
Do you want to pronounce his name, Connor? Because I'll let you have a go at it. But yeah, no, all joking aside, it's this is the enormity that comes with these massive games in the season. You're going to have players struggling to play in every game, and I didn't think the Thuney loss was obviously he's a marquee player, but like yesterday they've evolved over the course of the last few weeks in the offensive line, and we've seen this. They've kind of come together at the right time over the course of the season. And players are stepping up and doing big things. It'd be interesting to see how the dynamic of their defensive line with, again, a defensive end who's been productive over the course of the season. There you go. I was glad you were pronouncing, because I've had a few goes at it today, because I believe he's one of the players that came from the Georgia Tech side, and obviously we've got that college football game coming this August. He's one of the players from that college. It's something that we have coming out over the course of the next 2 weeks for our cores in the lead up to the Super Bowl. Yeah, it's a terrible loss. Obviously, it's been confirmed in the last half an hour he's gone for the Super Bowl. So, but Spagnuolo will find a way, as I say, to navigate. Not necessarily that they're going to win the game, but he'll find a way to come up with a solution and fit someone else in, or the rotation will be moved around. But ultimately, I think come 2 weeks' time, they'll find a way.
Yeah, in Spags We Trust was the legend emblazoned on the T-shirts that the Chiefs defensive unit wore ahead of that game, and that stood them in good stead. They'll need all their trust in him in a couple of weeks' time, of course, because meeting the Chiefs in Las Vegas will be the 49ers. The Niners made a home stand against the Detroit Lions, who stormed out of the traps to take a 17-point lead into the half. The Niners, however, remembered in the second half that they have the league's most formidable collection of explosive playmakers. We got a thrilling game in Levi's Stadium, Column. Let's start at the beginning. The Lions really answered the bell. Like, they're landing deep, big shots all over the Niners. Jameson Williams bursts in for a touchdown. They're 2 scores up before you know where you are. The run game's showing up big. Ben Johnson seems to have schemed up the perfect plan to knock the Niners on the back foot, and they're getting defensive stops. All of it was going exactly to plan.
Yeah, and what you'd say is they were using, it was like judo, they were using their opponent's strengths against them. They knew that Nick Bosa is a heat-seeking missile. They knew he'd look to get the ball, and they hid the ball from him. Nick Bosa went one way, and Jameson Williams went the other. I will point out, Chase Young, buddy, you are out of contract in a few weeks. Who is going to give you the type of money that you're looking for? I mean, for the 49ers, they rolled the dice on him, but my goodness, he just looks completely disinterested on a team where everybody is busting a gut, like the best players, Christian McCaffrey, Nick Bosa, George Kittle, every single player is putting it in. He looks like he'd prefer to be anywhere else.
We talked about him getting handled by Dontavian Wicks when they played the Packers last week, and if that doesn't wake you up, nothing will. But he was just a no-show. I'd actually forgotten he was playing for the 49ers at one point.
Oh, watch the touchdown, and watch his lack of effort. Like he just saunters across the pitch. It's like watching the old. Do you remember the Mr. Soft ad, the Mint, where the guy is walking around? That's how he is, and such a stark contrast to the entirety of the rest of the defense and the rest of the team. Look, for the Lions, it opened exactly the way in which they would have wanted it to open, and everything looked kind of absolutely fantastic up until right towards kind of we came up to the end of halftime.
Brian, talk to us about what happened next, because
deep breaths. What happened next?
Part of me thinks that you can only keep the 49ers quiet for so long. I mean, the Packers look to have dialed up a perfect plan the previous week, and you limit the explosive plays. You run the ball down their throats. You get the turnovers, which the Lions did. The Packers didn't, and that we talked about how critical that was in that game against Green Bay. Darnell Savage dropped one as one that'll haunt the Packers. The Lions get the turnover. They capitalize on the turnover. They had the 49ers exactly where they wanted. But to be fair, they made the adjustments at halftime. And when they got rolling, I mean, they had the ball, they had the ball 5 times in the second half. They scored on every single possession.
They did, but at the same time, you got to look at the normally the time that was taken off the clock to do that. And I'd start with the opening drive of the second half. 8 plays, and they take a large chunk off the clock. It only results in a field goal. A field goal that just about went over. Like Moody, for me, is a bit like we've seen him miss in Cleveland. We saw the one in the first half. He's a flight risk for me going into the Super Bowl in terms of the game and the pressure's on. Whether he can make it.
Just at the end of our picks last week, we were very nervous about a team with a dodgy kicker going into the playoffs. They've gotten away with that a couple of times.
He did, yeah. It was rightly called out, and I still think that's a big concern going to the game. The next drive that the Lions go on another comprehensive drive, Colin touched on it there, to get away from Bosa. They run continuously on the Niners defense, which really over the course of the game couldn't really stop them until later on in the game, which they kind of got to grips with them. By and large, the running game was really effective. Gibbs Montgomery had a much better game. And then we get to the situation, and look, like this isn't a shutdown on Campbell, because I know everyone has a mixed opinion on this today. So I'm going to give my tuppence worth, right? So there's 6 or 7 minutes left.
I'm just rooting around for my tuppence here, Brian, because I know your tuppence is different from my tuppence.
Okay, well, look, all season long he's gone for 4th down. Okay, so I get the nature. Okay, so he's going to come out of this game now as, oh yeah, that's the aggressive head coach. Really should be coming out of this game as, oh, that's the Superbowl head coach, as opposed to the aggressive head coach. If they made that 4th down play, because this is all about analytics, isn't it? It's all about stats and all this information that we're fed every day the week when an NFL game is on. If they made that 4th down play to win the game, it was 90.8% that they would win the game. If they kicked the field goal, which was a 40-yard field goal, Basley is 3 for 3 over the course of the season, 40 in. Okay, so he's got a 100% record. Okay, they're 21 of 40. I gave him a disservice last night. I said they were 42% on 4th down. They're 50%. So it's a 50-50 shot as opposed to a kicker who is 100% on his kicks. Go on, Colin. You want to jump in? So anyway, the percentage rate of them winning the game with making that field goal, 90.3%. But again, he decided that he wanted to get away from that. The next piece I would say about this scenario is, if he goes up by 17 points with 6 minutes left in the 3rd quarter, okay, so we're talking about 21 minutes of football to go. They have to score 3 times. So effectively, for me, takes away the run game, because now all of a sudden Purdy has to pass. They can't continue to run. They're going to eat the clock. So now they're in a position where Purdy, over the course of the first half in particular, was getting pressed on, because the Lions, from 5, in fairness, were getting to him quite a lot. The pressure was on. For me, that takes away another piece where potentially he could turn the ball over. And then ultimately, for me, it's about momentum. And you go up 17 points, and the momentum is still on your side, despite the opening drive from the 49ers. You've rebounded. You've taken a field goal. But look, it is what it is. He's done it all season long. I can't say I agree with it. The one later on, I felt he should have kicked it as well. And we're talking about a championship game with an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl. Come on. I'll leave it. I'll hand it back.
I'm going to make the counterpoint here, because exactly, we're talking about a championship game, and you mentioned momentum there. We literally just said the 49ers scored on every single possession. The strength of the Lions is your offense. This team that does not have a good defense. Their special teams, as we talked about, the kicker, Badgley, is good from over 40 yards. He's not nails. You don't have Harrison Butker here or Justin Tucker. There's no such thing as a 100% kick, certainly not in the playoffs.
But he was 100% kind of on the ones.
Was right, because firstly, one of those kicks goes over, you go to overtime. That's not the way for the underdog to win. The underdog wins on the road by taking the shots, taking the 7s when you can get to 7, pushing for 7 when you can get 7, rather than settling for 3. And I think you go with no regrets if you do what Campbell did. And I don't quite understand why he's being slated for that. I think the other thing is, if all season long you've been putting the ball in Jared Goff's hands and leaving your offense out in the field and going for it on 4th down, if you suddenly in the championship game decide not to do that, I think you shatter the confidence in your offense, which is, as I said, the strength of this team. That's what they do. Like, at least they went out in their shields doing what they've done all season long. It was a football loss for me. I think people are assuming, firstly, all the kicks are guaranteed to go over. We just talked about how Jake Moody missed one from 43. You're asking Badgley to hit from 45 and 47 with all the pressure on him. Even if you get to overtime, like we've seen that movie play out a number of times, The one of the two AFC championship games that Patrick Mahomes lost, you lose the coin toss, you lose the game before you even get back on the field, especially against a team with the kind of explosive offense that the Niners had. They're rolling at that point. Whatever about the first kick, the second time to go for it on fourth down, he's looking at that 49ers team and he's looking at his own defense going, we can't stop these guys. We need to pile up as many points as we can or we're not going to Vegas.
Can I make one more point before Colin comes back in? Yeah, they couldn't stop them over the course of the second half. But at that stage, they'd only had the ball once in the second half, and it resulted in a field goal. He also would have then needed 3 scores. They would have had to score 3 times. And if you look at the clock and the measurement of the game, Lions realistically probably would have got the ball back 3 times. So the Lions could have went and scored again. So ultimately, you would have put a position where they would have had to get to 34, 35 points to beat them. That's a hard task. Bear in mind, you're already 17 points down. So we are where we are.
Hang on. Badgley hasn't kicked outdoors. Not kicked outdoors all season. Badgley hasn't kicked outdoors since 2022. Badgley in between 40 and 49 is just over 76% in his career. The Lions have converted 80% of their 4th and 3 or less this year. 80%. San Francisco has allowed 71.4% of their 4th and 3 or less this year. Right, so the Lions are 4th best, 49ers are 28th. But that's all stats. Dan Campbell didn't talk about stats at all. If you watch what he said, Dan Campbell talked about the reason he went for it is he places huge value in trust and in his players and them believing in it. He also wanted to keep the 49ers off the field. Like if Reynolds and he should have caught that ball. And the Lions have issues in that Jared Goff is terrible under pressure for the most part, right? And that they have got to figure out that if they're going to give him a big contract extension. But that might be the one play where Goff actually does well with it. He feels the pressure coming. He steps up. He makes the throw. And ultimately, Reynolds cannot get it done. And that was... like
criticized for the throw column in certain media outlets today. I know. I'm only making the point. I don't agree with you. I don't agree.
The ball is there. I mean, Ayuk had to scoop it off the ground, inches off the ground from Purdy. A couple of last week. To me, I totally understand the call. This is the way Dan Campbell plays. I think in the biggest moments, having a coach willing to it is the antithesis of what Staley would have done, who would have absolutely turtled, who would have looked at it and would have gone away from it. Did it work? No. Ultimately, but Reynolds was open. The play call was good. It was the receiver who let them down. If you get that, you take another 2.5 minutes off the clock from the 49ers, very, very likely, no matter what, right? Because you're going to run the 3 plays. And I understand it. You want to go for it. It would have. My criticism of Dan Campbell, if it is to exist, is not going for it at the half. I would have got. He should have gone for it every time. If he gets it there and they go into the half up by 21, and again, to me, there was that
one's an interesting one to me though, Colin, because I think that shows and I've criticized Dan Campbell's play calling at times and criticized some decisions that he's made, including leaving the starters out in the final game of the season, leading to Sam Laporta's injury, which wasn't the smartest thing he's ever done. But that one before halftime, I think, goes to show that he's not an outright gambler, right? I think the argument there from an analytics point of view is 49ers are getting the ball after halftime. You know that for a fact. So if you go for it and you don't make it, you got no points, and the 49ers cut a 2-possession lead to a 1-possession lead. You go for it on fourth down when you're that close to the end zone with more time on the clock, and at least you're pinning back the opponents on their own goal line. You're making it difficult for them to come. But that was a non-factor there. So I think there was a slight argument in favor of guarantee yourself to 17, because that was a cheap chip shot field goal for Michael Badgley or for anyone else. You guarantee yourself to 17 points, and you guarantee you have a 3-possession lead going into the half, knowing that the Niners get the ball back. But, as you say, it's very makeable as well. And I wonder, is that the one that they look at and go, they're bound to get one of the 3 if they'd gone for it all 3 times. That might have been the one.
And also, to get away from this conversation, because I think there's merits. I think there's merits to both sides of it. Whether we all agree or not is one thing. We just, as I like to say, situational football, and sometimes the conservative approach for me is better. The last drive, well, like at this stage, I think the game was probably over. But like the call a run play, and that's on Ben Johnson today. Like it's not on Dan Cam. Like you're in a situation where you need to keep those timeouts. You need those 3 timeouts because that last timeout gone essentially was the one that allowed the 49ers to run it down. Obviously, 1 second. He calls a run play. It reminded me of the Giants in Buffalo on that crazy drive before halftime where they called an audible and they went to Saquon. Same scenario. He called an audible.
Because you're surely getting an onside kick. Like you've got to try and preserve your timeouts and hope that you can get a defensive stop, which is much likelier than recovering an onside kick.
Absolutely. So, like he should have been saying to for me, he should have been saying, Johnson, I don't care what the circumstance. We're talking about going out on the sword here. Cuff, dial up 4 throws into the end zone and make sure the clock is getting stopped after each of them. We can't have a scenario where we're giving away a timeout because essentially, even if we score here, the game is pretty much gone. We're in a scenario with the 3 timeouts. Who knows? They could have got the ball back. It probably would have been a big ask to get into field goal range at that stage, but still, that's just another killer.
Colm, talk to us about the Purdy performance, because I think whether you're a Purdy believer or a Purdy detractor, I don't think either side claimed a complete victory from this one. Like Purdy was good when he was good, but man, he also had some very shaky moments. I don't know if heading into Vegas, I'm still not sure if this is a guy you want under center.
Oh, no, Connor. No. Ryan Clark says Purdy has separated himself from Dak. He's separated himself from Justin Herbert. Oh, he's much better. Like, look, again, I cannot believe the discourse around him. Purdy is a good player. And this should be
I don't know if any other quarterback column can bank a ball off a defender's helmet into the outstretched arms of his best wide receiver in a crucial spot. Like, you show me anyone else who can make that show.
They're players that you look back on when you're watching America's game 9 months later, Connor, and say, "Oh, that was a play when we knew we were going to win the Super Bowl."
Yes.
As opposed to the quarterback, sorry.
And the escape the one on the line. But no, Brock Purdy should be an incredible story. This actually should be the guy we're all rooting for, right? To go from the last pick to what he has done, overcoming the injuries, an incredible season. But because the discourse means that like you have to go with him being the bestest player in the world. Like people want to talk about him as if he is Tom Brady, as if he is Joe Montana. That's really out there. Like this is insane. Could he become Tom Brady? Sure. It's a long way to go, but the need to anoint him as that, and if you don't, you're some sort of hater.
Sorry, Colin. If they're gonna win the Super Bowl, they need him to be Tom Brady, because lest we forget, only 2 quarterbacks have ever beaten Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, and one of them is Joe Burrow, and the other one is Tom Brady.
No, there is that, but like, I just don't understand the need, and so like, yes, we live in this super connected world now and you have to have the hot takes and you have to have immediate takes, but I think Brock Purdy is a good player. I think he can make brilliant plays. We saw that on display. I think at other times he can make absolutely boneheaded decisions, and I think at other times he gets lucky. But you know what? Everybody gets lucky. Do you know who got lucky in 28-3? Tom Brady and Julian Edelman when he made an incredible catch. So luck plays a part of it. We don't need to say that Brock Purdy is elite. Joe Flacco had an amazing playoff run with the Ravens. They won a Super Bowl. Did that mean that Joe Flacco was the equal of Joe Montana? That he was the equal of Tom Brady? Is Nick Foles? Should we put Nick Foles on the Mount Rushmore?
I've seen Sexy Rexy take the Bears to a Super Bowl, one that they narrowly lost. Of course, as you say, Jeff Hostetler, Nick Foles, there's Joe Flacco, they're all out there.
Like it goes too far. Like and it's immediate. Like last year, Jalen Hurts had an incredible season, right? This year, Jalen Hurts had a poor season. I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle there. I think I really like Jalen Hurts as a QB and as a person, but I don't think Jalen Hurts is Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert. I think he's a good QB. So to me, I just think, can we just watch this play out? Can we enjoy Brock Purdy for what he is? Can we enjoy the 49ers for what they are without the need to say, this is it. This kid has it. He's him. He's Brady. He's Montana. He's Elway. He's everything rolled into one.
Brian, looking at that game, you can talk about incredible one-handed grab that Juwan Jennings makes. IU comes up with a couple of spectacular plays. Deebo Samuel had a couple of great plays. Christian McCaffrey was doing Christian McCaffrey things. For me, somebody who deserves to be highlighted is Nick Bosa, who I thought, particularly in the second half, was amazing and stepped up in a massive way. He was more or less a non-factor in the first half, but when the Niners needed him, he was there.
Yeah, absolutely. The first half, Colin called it out earlier in terms of Goff's numbers. When he's not pressured, they're fantastic. But ultimately, when he's under pressure, the numbers dwindle and drop down significantly, and that's what happened over the course of the second half, and primarily down to the fact that Bosa finally kind of was make life difficult for the offensive line, and then obviously Goff in particular. Like there's some stats today around his numbers in the first half, as opposed to when the pressure was on and Bosa was really interfering. And again, we've got the turnover again. We haven't even touched on that. Like, once we can chew the fat over if it missed field goal or not taking a field goal or whatever the scenario is, they still go down and score a touchdown. The Lions are still in the position to go and win the game. They're getting the ball back, and obviously, to me, that was probably more so the turning point in the sense of short field, opportunity to score and tie the game up so quickly. But again, that was all down to the defense. And ultimately, the defense came up good in the fourth quarter. It came up good last week as well at times with the 2 interceptions with Greenlaw. And you're right, like Bosa's a leading light going into the Super Bowl. And this is, as Colin said, this is the game, this is the team that they've built up, that this is the moment for them to win the Super Bowl. And in 2 weeks, same before with Von Miller, like, is it against the realms of possibility that he takes over the game and becomes the MVP? Not in a million years, but I consider a defensive player not to be in the running for this, because this Chiefs offense isn't the offense of old. And if they can dominate the way they did in the second half at times, it could be a difficult night for the Chiefs. It's going to be a great game in 2 weeks.
Colin, Lions-wise, though, and I thought, Leisha's making the point there again in the comments, Dan Campbell in the post-conference presser was everything you expect Dan Campbell to be. He was thoughtful, he was emotional, but it was interesting to hear him talk about, because, as a player, Brian will remember well, he played for the Giants in a Super Bowl that they lost. That was his only time getting to the big game, and he's repeatedly emphasized it to the Lions players. You don't know how hard it is to win playoff games in this league. You should be proud of yourselves. You never know when you're going to get a shot like this. And he said himself, it's possible that this could be the only time we get this far. I don't think that's going to be the case, but that's the way I wanted the players to approach it. And to be fair, we've talked about it from a coaching perspective, whether you agreed with him or not. He certainly left it all out there and won't die wondering about the choices he made. It's a tough road back, though. Like we talked about it last year from an Eagles perspective when they got all the way to the Super Bowl. A lot of people were saying, yeah, they're nailed on to run it back, but it's so difficult, and it ain't getting any easier, particularly in that NFC North. Now that we've seen the full range of what Jordan Love and that Packers team can do, you wonder where the Vikings will be. Bears could be playing with the number 1 overall pick in the draft, or with a clutch of upgraded weapons around Justin Fields. All of that makes it more and more difficult for the Lions to get back. You've got to capitalize on your opportunities when they come your way. Maybe getting to the championship game is no disgrace for that Lions team, but they'll want more.
Yeah, no, look, you get this far, and as you said, you want to go further, but more than that, like, it was there. This was not a team who were, absolutely blown out. This was not the Eagles beatdown of the Vikings in that when they went to win the Super Bowl. Or as we've seen, when it's so clear that, like, no matter what you did on the particular day, it wasn't going to be it for you. So to me, like, there are many moments they can point to, and yeah, we've talked a lot about the fourth down, but like Gibbs's the fumble, the overthrow to Laporta, the fact that Goff struggled when the pressure was put on him, they'll all have, look back on it. I do think Ben Johnson will end up getting a job. I mean, I think it will be Bill Belichick ultimately who misses out when, the game musical chairs comes to an end. And if that is the case, then it will change it, right? Because when an offensive coordinator moves on, very likely he takes 1 or 2 of the other guys with him. What does that do for the Lions? I would hope that they aren't going to go the route of just going with the quarterback coach. It will be tough, but look, they have shown an ability to draft really well. And I don't think that they're team was quite on the same level defensively as the 49ers.
And to your point, Colin, and this is kind of the killer. It's where you get punished for progressing too far in the playoffs almost. If Ben Johnson, as everybody expects, leaves to get a head coaching job, most of the good offensive coordinators have already been hired.
Yeah, though again, like I think you can search around. I just don't think you go with the obvious answer. Like, to me, that's what the Eagles did last year. That's what the Bills did with Dorsey, and that didn't work out. I think, and Dan Campbell seems the sort who puts a lot of thought into it and who will go searching. If you were to have hope,
there's another bloke, Bobby Slowick, out there somewhere, right? You don't necessarily have to go for an obvious play caller.
That's the thing. I think that people will want to work with Dan Campbell. The question, though, of course, is around Goff, and how is his ceiling good enough to win a Super Bowl? We've seen it when everything is right. It can take you to a Super Bowl. It can take you to a championship game. But like, can he get you over the hump ultimately? They're fascinating, right? They've been building towards this. Can they continue?
Well, we touched on this already. If Mr. Irrelevant wins the Super Bowl, people are going to be rooting around for quarterbacks in the draft like somebody looking for a Nokia charger in the bottom of the drawer in their kitchen.
Yes. Look, it's copycat league, and but it again, it shows, I suppose, that you need to be potentially the best of the best in Patrick Mahomes, or you need to have a QB on that rookie contract. Brian,
it kind of strikes me, and it's mad because Patrick Mahomes is the one who ought to be in the Super Bowl. It strikes me as that kind of Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes type scenario, which the Lions would be looking to the danger and where they're pick second in the draft is not probably going to help them. But like Lamar Jackson went to 32, so it doesn't necessarily mean you won't get the right quarterback. But it strikes me as a team right now, because where would he go outside of Goff? Goff understands the system, he understands the foundation of what the team are trying to build. It strikes me they need to find a quarterback that can come in, understand the nature of what's involved in working for Dan Campbell, and then ultimately take over from Goff at some stage. But there is a talk of a contract for Goff this offseason, so it'll be interesting to see how much they invest in that. I don't think it'd be an upper level contract. I wouldn't even suggest it'd be that crazy 40 million tag that we've spoken about before with the likes of Daniel Jones and other various different quarterbacks that are looking at those numbers now. But it looks to me they have to find a way. They tried with various different other opportunities with quarterbacks, but it hasn't.
To be fair to Goff, how unfortunate would he be not to get the contract? Matthew Stafford didn't win playoff games in Detroit, and he had Megatron to throw to.
Well, it's true, but it's a different time. This team is like, he had Megatron, but he didn't have very little else around them. In fairness to the Lions, they've got a very attack-minded team with two really strong running backs to help him fend off the need to be continuously throwing. He's got various different outlets in terms of great, like Holmes has done a fantastic job in terms of the players. Laporta coming in, they were suggesting he was too high in the second round. I think we touched on last week. You've got a Gibbs running back.
Fix the defense. One stop and you're in the Super Bowl. One stop in the second half.
I think that would primarily have to be the focus this offseason. I don't know what their cap situation is in terms of looking over the cap. In terms of, I'm sure like the numbers can be fudged, as we keep saying with teams. And Colin called it last week where the Bucs been 80 million over. They make the playoffs. The Saints always seem to find themselves in cap hell, yet they're competitive the following season. So I think there'll be players that they can pick up on certain deals. I think one thing I would say will be good for them is they can attract players in. It's not about just going and taking the dime or taking the cash. People will want to go play for them. I'm sure players that are going into free agency will be asking the question of Lions players in which they know what's he like to work for. Exactly. So this is the thing. But ultimately it's about getting it right defensively, because over the course of the season we've seen so many high-scoring games and they've come out the right side of many, but ultimately they've fallen short, and someone fell short in this one in the end.
And we'll see who does go all the way in just 2 weeks' time. But before we go, a reminder that if you'd like to join the Irish NFL show for our live event on March 28th, that's Holy Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, with NBC's Peter King in association with our partners QuinBet, RuPoint, and the Aer Lingus College Football Classic, please click the link. You'll find that on at IRE NFL on X or at IRE NFL Show on Instagram. Our social channels there have all the information that you're going to need for that one. As we said, we're going to be heading to Vegas for the Super Bowl. Colin will be right there from opening night. We'll have plenty of exclusive content all the way through. We'll have interviews, we'll have commentary, we'll have picks and previews and all that good stuff coming at you, and plenty more content to come between now and then as well on the Irish NFL Show.